There are days when silence feels sacred, and days when even breathing hurts. Moments when everything flows effortlessly, and others when the world feels too heavy to move. You call it instability, you call it weakness, but Hermeticism calls it what it truly is: rhythm. Everything moves, everything flows, everything oscillates, and what you've been calling chaos might just be the movement of the law itself. What tortures you is not the swing, it's your resistance to it. The more you try to hold the wave still, the more it drowns you. The more you cling to peace, the more you fear its loss. You live trying to freeze the wind and wonder why you're exhausted. But the wind was never your enemy. It is the breath of existence itself. There's a pendulum inside you that never stops. It swings between euphoria and fatigue, between desire and retreat, between love and withdrawal. And every time it reaches an extreme, your mind rushes to control the swing. You want only the light, you reject the dark. You want only the highs, you avoid the depths. But the universe doesn't obey human preference, it obeys law. And the law is rhythm. The sea rises and falls. The heart expands and contracts. The day is born and dies. Balance isn't stillness, it's consciousness inside movement. You were taught to fight your own tides. When sadness comes, you run. When joy comes, you fear it won't last. In both, you abandon the rhythm. The truth is simple and merciless. Whoever resists the cycle breaks with it. Whoever tries to stop the pendulum becomes the pendulum. That's why you're tired, not physically, but psychically. It's the exhaustion of resisting life itself. Emotions are tides, and like every tide, they obey invisible forces. Lunar, internal, cosmic. What you call mood swings is simply the music of life trying to teach you how to move, but you were taught to fear the song. You learned to desire silence, and in that desire you muted your own pulse. Anxiety, boredom, restlessness, they're not enemies, they're messengers. They arrive to tell you, you are out of rhythm. Stop for a moment and listen. Right now, there's rhythm within you. Your heart beats, your lungs rise and fall, your blood flows, your mind expands and contracts with every thought. You are not chaos, you are a living rhythm, but you forgot. And when you forget, movement becomes suffering. The dance turns to struggle. The wave turns to drowning. You think you've lost control, but the truth is deeper. You never had it. Control is a myth, born from the fear of feeling, and as long as you try to control the flow, you'll remain a slave to it. The secret is not to stop the pendulum, it's to find the center, that invisible, still point that doesn't move, even when everything else does. That point is consciousness, and that is where the Hermetic path begins. In the stillness within motion, picture yourself standing before the ocean. The waves crash with power, yet something in you simply watches. That something is the part that never drowns. It is silent, motionless, eternal. It is the axis of the pendulum, and when you remember it, the rhythm stops being punishment and becomes power, because the same motion that creates pain also creates strength. Every emotion follows a cycle: birth, growth, decline, death. When you allow that cycle, you stop clinging. Anger comes, fulfills its purpose, and leaves. Sadness comes, cleanses, and dissolves. Joy comes, expands, and fades. Nothing is permanent, and in that impermanence lies peace. Suffering is what happens when you try to freeze what was meant to flow. Freedom begins when you remember you were never meant to be still. Hermeticism calls this the mastery of the pendulum. It is not about repression, it is understanding. It's not about destroying chaos, it's learning to read its pattern. Life moves in cycles because that's the architecture of creation. Everything vibrates, everything oscillates, everything returns, and the wise one moves with the tide instead of against it. But here lies the paradox. To master motion, you must first stop trying to control it. Breathe, feel your body. Notice the natural rhythm of air moving in and out. That is the law at work within you. The breath is the microcosm of the cosmic rhythm, the eternal pulse of life. Inhalation, expansion, exhalation, contraction, life, death, and between them, the sacred stillness that holds both. The mind moves the same way. It expands into euphoria, contracts into fear, but there's a neutral point between both, the stillness of awareness. When you find it, the pendulum loses its power over you. That's where emotional mastery begins. Not in control, but in lucidity. Not in force, but in presence. The modern world lives out of rhythm, bodies accelerated, minds fragmented, hearts collapsing under invisible pressure. We no longer move with the sun, but with the screen. No longer breathe to the pulse of the earth, but to the rhythm of notifications. The natural pendulum became an artificial storm. But Hermeticism reminds us, every force misunderstood becomes a prison. Every force understood becomes a tool. You need to remember that rhythm is sacred, that every ascent prepares the descent, and every descent fuels the next rise. Calm is not the absence of motion, it's harmony with it. The universe never stops, and neither do you. When you start observing your emotions as tides instead of monsters, something shifts. You begin to recognize cycles, invisible patterns within you, days of brightness, days of retreat, phases of fullness, phases of emptiness, all necessary. You are not broken. You are breathing. The soul has its own lungs. At first, it feels strange to allow yourself to oscillate without judgment, but soon, you realize that true power lives in that acceptance, not the power to control what you feel, but the power not to drown in what you feel. The pendulum keeps moving, but your center remains. That is where mastery begins. The secret is not to fight movement, it's to dance with it. The mind craves stability, but life demands flow. Only when you stop resisting the sea can you learn to surf it. That is the hermetic art of rhythm, turning the rise and fall of existence into inner music. Pain becomes tempo, chaos becomes harmony, oscillation becomes wisdom. Notice what's alive in you now. Perhaps it's tension, perhaps it's silence. It's okay, nothing needs to be forced. Just breathe. Feel the pendulum within you, not as enemy but as the heartbeat of life. And as you do, realize there's something in you that doesn't move. That is the observer. That is the axis. That is where chaos bows to consciousness. That is where mastery begins. Not through control, but through awareness. Not through rigidity, but through rhythm. The true master of emotion is not the one who never oscillates, but the one who always returns to center. That's the silent art of balance. The pendulum still swings, but you are no longer the pendulum. You are the axis. You are the still point inside the wave. And for the first time, you breathe in harmony with life. Maybe no one ever noticed how deeply your tides have been moving. Maybe you've walked for years trying to hold still what was always meant to flow. You didn't find this by accident. Messages like this aren't pushed. They're pulled by the resonance inside you. If something deep stirred while you listened, if it felt less like learning and more like remembering, it means the rhythm has always been within you. The pulse you seek has been calling your name all along. We're about to reveal what has always been waiting beneath the surface, and from this moment on, there is no going back to stillness without awareness. If you felt something vibrate inside your chest, click like, now. That gesture is your, I'm here, a sign that you too are beginning to move with the hidden rhythm of your own soul. There is a fatigue you can't name. It hides behind your eyes when you scroll, when you work, when you pretend to care. It's the exhaustion of constant motion, not of the body but of the soul. You wake up already accelerated. Your mind begins to sprint before your feet touch the ground. You reach for the screen, that endless pendulum of noise, and before you know it, you're swinging again. Up, down, hope and disappointment, validation and emptiness, pleasure and guilt. It's not life you're living anymore. It's oscillation, mechanical, hollow, involuntary. We've become a civilization addicted to extremes. One second we crave silence, the next we drown in stimulation. We call it productivity, but it's frenzy. We call it connection, but it's fragmentation. The collective pulse is erratic. It speeds up when the algorithm spikes and crashes when attention fades. And beneath it all, there's a quiet panic, a feeling that we're losing something essential, the natural rhythm that once held our humanity. The ancients called this state dissonance, when the inner tempo of the soul falls out of harmony with the cosmic pulse. It's what happens when you mistake constant acceleration for evolution, when you replace stillness with scrolling, when your nervous system becomes your god. You weren't designed for permanent movement. Every wave needs its retreat, every inhale its exhale, but we've erased the silence between the beats. And now, all that remains is noise. Imagine living inside a song with no pauses. That's the modern mind. A melody with no space to breathe. We mistake volume for vitality, and the louder it gets, the less we feel. Because rhythm is not speed, rhythm is proportion. It's the sacred balance between motion and rest. When you forget that, you lose coherence. Your energy becomes fragmented, your thoughts chaotic, your emotions raw and unstable. You've felt it, the inner whiplash, the swing from overexcitement to exhaustion. One moment, you're full of ideas. The next, you can't stand yourself. It's the same pendulum, only faster, artificially charged by dopamine and distraction. You're not actually moving forward. You're oscillating in place, burning energy in invisible circles. And the tragedy is, you've learned to call this normal. Hermetically speaking, what's happening to humanity is a violation of the principle of rhythm. The pendulum has always existed, but now it's being hijacked. The natural swing of emotion has been replaced by engineered oscillation. Everything is designed to keep you moving, not growing, not expanding, just moving. Fast enough to feel alive, but never slow enough to awaken. You're not broken, you're overstimulated, and the system profits from that imbalance. The invisible predator, the Hermetic archetype of energy manipulation, thrives on imbalance. It feeds on your oscillation, on the loss of your natural rhythm. It doesn't want you to rest, because rest restores awareness, and awareness breaks control, so it keeps you swinging between highs and lows, victories and collapses, dopamine rushes and existential fatigue, never stopping long enough to remember you have a center. Look closer. Every digital gesture is a small pendulum. Scroll up, scroll down, swipe right, swipe left, click, refresh, repeat. It looks harmless, but it's hypnotic. It reprograms your nervous system to crave rhythm without meaning, movement without direction. You become a marionette of invisible motion, chasing fragments of satisfaction in an infinite loop. And yet something in you knows, something in you feels the cost, because each swing has a price. The higher the emotional peak, the deeper the collapse that follows. Euphoria becomes anxiety, pleasure becomes numbness, connection becomes emptiness, and slowly, your soul stops trusting joy, because it knows that right after the rise comes the fall. So you learn to live in the middle ground of mediocrity, afraid of feeling too much, afraid of losing control. That is the silent trauma of modern life, a heart that fears its own rhythm. But this is the beginning of awakening, the moment you start to notice the pattern. The Hermetic law says everything flows in and out, all things rise and fall. Once you recognize this law in action, you are no longer a victim of it. You begin to watch the swing instead of being flung by it. Awareness itself slows the pendulum. Observation breaks hypnosis. You can't fight what you don't see, but once you see it, the spell weakens. So notice your own rhythms. Notice how your energy peaks and collapses. Notice how your emotions repeat cycles. Notice how your mind craves stimulation when it feels emptiness. Each of these moments is a clue, a map leading you back to the law you've forgotten. You can't restore balance through resistance. You restore it through awareness. You start to see, this isn't chaos. It's a pattern. And in that recognition, power returns. The Hermetic texts call this the beginning of mastery, when you start to identify the law operating within your own suffering. It's the moment you stop saying, I am anxious, and begin saying, I am watching anxiety move. Subtle difference, infinite consequence. Because once you become the watcher, the wave no longer owns you. You begin to surf it. But awareness alone isn't enough. It must turn into rhythm. You have to reclaim your natural tempo. Step out of the artificial oscillations of technology, comparison, and digital hypnosis, and back into your biological cosmic rhythm. That means slowing down, not laziness and alignment, not withdrawal, coherence. The universe moves in cycles, so must you. It starts with something simple, Pause before reacting. Breathe before responding. Notice the space between impulses. That space is the door back to equilibrium. Every time you find it, you weaken the machinery of manipulation. Every time you remember it, the law starts working for you, not against you. Humanity is entering an era of correction, a collective recalibration of rhythm. Those who learn to move consciously will rise. Those who remain trapped in artificial tides will collapse. The Hermetic Principle doesn't punish, it restores order, and it's restoring itself through the very chaos we see around us. The breakdown is not the end, it's the pendulum reaching its limit before returning to center. The question is, will you be thrown with it, or will you ride the return consciously? Because the rhythm will move, with or without your awareness. But if you choose to move with it, to breathe with it, to listen to it, you become something extraordinary. A being who no longer reacts to emotion, but conducts it. A consciousness in motion, not a body in chaos. That is emotional mastery, and it begins here, by observing the oscillation instead of obeying it. You were never meant to live in constant acceleration. You were meant to move like the stars, cyclic, harmonious, alive. And when you remember that, the noise begins to lose its power. The pendulum slows, and for the first time in years, you feel the sacred silence between the beats. If you're still here, it's because this truth is already yours. The first map, the one that reveals how to reclaim your rhythm, is waiting in the pinned portal. Breathe and take the next step. What if your emotions were not random? What if every rise and fall, every wave of joy and collapse of despair, obeyed an invisible law, the same law that governs the tides, the planets, and the beating of your heart? You call it instability. The ancients called it the principle of rhythm. Everything in the universe breathes. Every atom, every storm, every thought. There is a pulse beneath creation, a hidden metronome that keeps existence from dissolving into chaos. You live inside that pulse. You are that pulse, but you forgot how to listen. The Hermetic texts say, everything flows, out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. It means nothing moves in a straight line. Everything oscillates, from galaxies to emotions, from civilizations to the beat of your own heart. When you understand this, instability stops being a curse. It becomes navigation. Your sadness is not punishment, it's the return of the tide. Your joy is not permanent, it's the crest before the descent. Both are necessary, both are sacred, and both are parts of the same rhythm that sustains life itself. But humanity has forgotten the law of rhythm. We built lives around permanence, permanent pleasure, permanent progress, permanent happiness, and when the inevitable descent comes, we call it failure. We panic, we medicate, we escape. We resist what was never meant to be resisted, because in our arrogance we tried to cut the wave in half, to live only in the rising. But a half wave is distortion, and distortion always leads to suffering. This is why so many today are emotionally unstable, not because they feel too much, but because they fight what they feel. Every emotion has a beginning, a peak, and a decline. If you interrupt that rhythm, it turns against you. Anger becomes resentment. Sadness becomes depression. Desire becomes addiction. Each emotion, when blocked, mutates. It becomes poison instead of passage. You are not meant to hold the wave. You are meant to let it pass through you. The true Hermetic student learns to ride the rhythm. They do not cling to the crest nor fear the descent. They observe the pendulum swing and they stay in the center. That center is not numbness, it is awareness. It's the still point from which the law can be seen without distortion. When you dwell in that center, the law serves you instead of moving through you unconsciously. You no longer react. You respond. You no longer drown. You float. Think of a pendulum in motion. The farther it swings to one side, the more force it gathers for the return. This is the law of balance. The universe doesn't punish. It corrects. And the same happens within you. The deeper your despair, the greater the potential for peace. The stronger the contraction, the more powerful the expansion that follows. It's not cruel, it's symmetrical. If you could see your life from above, you'd notice the same geometry repeating itself. Waves within waves, cycles within cycles. Your relationships, your moods, your creative bursts, your periods of silence, all rhythmic, all alive, all lawful. But you're taught to fear these fluctuations, to get back to normal, to stay positive, as if positivity were a permanent state. It's not. It's a phase, like the waxing of the moon before the waning. To deny it is to deny reality itself. The Hermetic master doesn't chase constant positivity. They seek coherence. They understand that the goal is not to eliminate the swing, but to transcend its grip, to be moved but not manipulated, to feel but not to drown. That is the difference between chaos and rhythm. When you start to see the law in your daily life, something extraordinary happens. You begin to decode the patterns of your own emotions. You notice when the wave is rising. You prepare for its fall. You sense when energy contracts. You rest instead of resisting. You start living in harmony with your own biology, your own psyche, your own pulse. That's the first step toward mastery. The Hermeticists taught that this law operates on every level of existence. Mental, your moods and thoughts follow tides. Emotional, your heart expands and contracts like the sea. Physical, your body obeys circadian and seasonal rhythms. Cosmic, even the stars oscillate in cycles of birth and death. And so, to understand rhythm is to understand the structure of reality itself. It's to remember that the same intelligence that moves the planets moves through you. When you breathe, you're participating in cosmic order. When you resist, you separate from it. That separation is the true suffering, not the rhythm, but the refusal to dance with it. You ask, how do I stop being controlled by my emotions? The Hermetic answer is, you don't stop them. You align with them. You observe them like tides. You ride them without losing awareness. Because when awareness becomes constant, the pendulum no longer drags you. It obeys you. This is not suppression. It's sovereignty. You're not freezing emotion. You're mastering energy. The principle of rhythm is not philosophy. It's physics of the soul. It explains why everything that expands must eventually contract, why every success contains the seed of failure, and every fall the seed of rebirth. To the uninitiated, this looks cruel. To the awakened, it's mercy, because rhythm ensures renewal. Without decline, there's no rest. Without rest, there's no strength. Without strength, there's no ascent. Think of your breath again, the perfect teacher. You cannot inhale forever. If you try, you suffocate. You must release. And in that release, life returns. That's the law. That's rhythm. And it governs your emotions exactly the same way. The modern world suffocates because it forgot to exhale, always accumulating, consuming, achieving, expanding, never resting. No wonder the soul collapses. But you can restore the balance. It begins the moment you choose to stop fighting the swing and start listening to it. When sadness comes, you ask, what is it teaching me before it leaves? When joy comes, you whisper thank you and let it pass. You stop clinging. You start flowing. And suddenly, the chaos turns into choreography. To live by this law is to live as nature does, cyclic, intelligent, self-correcting. The seasons don't panic when winter arrives. They know spring will follow. The ocean doesn't rage when the tide recedes. It knows it will return. Why then do you fear your own low tides? Because you forgot that you are nature too, and nature never hurries. It only moves in rhythm. The Hermetic path is not about control, it's about harmony. To master the law of rhythm is to remember your original tempo. It's to become aligned with the pulse of creation itself. When you live in that alignment, emotions lose their tyranny. You still feel everything, but nothing owns you. You become like the tide, powerful but calm. And when storms come, you don't resist. You rise, you fall, you return. The secret was never to escape the pendulum. It was to become its axis. Because the axis doesn't move, it only observes. And in that stillness, you rediscover what the world forgot. Balance is not found in stillness. Balance is stillness, in motion. If you're still here, it's because this truth already lives inside you. Like the rhythm you forgot to hear, it's awakening again. Take a breath, slow and deep, and feel the pulse behind it. That is the law moving through you. If this resonance feels like remembrance, stay. The next revelation will teach you how to surf this rhythm. and turn emotion into mastery. Close your eyes for a moment. Watch your thoughts move. See how they swing, not just randomly, but rhythmically, from excitement to exhaustion, from clarity to confusion, from everything is possible to nothing makes sense. That motion, that invisible oscillation, is not chaos. It's the same principle of rhythm, now operating through your mind. Your emotions ride the waves of the body. Your thoughts ride the waves of the psyche, and both are synchronized, like ocean and moon, one pulling the other without ever truly separating. You think your thoughts belong to you, but most of them are simply momentum, the residue of yesterday's swing. Every thought you resist gathers force until it swings back harder. Every emotion you deny compresses into polarity, waiting for release. This is how the pendulum governs the mind of the untrained. It moves him, and he calls it destiny. But the Hermetic path reverses that order. You learn to move with awareness, so the swing no longer controls you. You begin to observe your own thought patterns as tides, not truths. A thought rises, I'm not enough. You see it. You breathe. You don't fight. You let it crest and fall. Another thought comes, maybe I am capable. You watch it too. You stop being the thought. You become the observer, and that is the beginning of freedom, because the pendulum feeds on identification. Every time you say, I am this, the swing tightens its grip. I am sad. I am angry. I am anxious. You bind your identity to a passing vibration, and when the swing reverses, as it always does, you are torn apart. The Hermetic master never says, I am sad. They say, sadness is visiting, not denial, awareness. Because what is visiting cannot stay, and what you observe cannot own you. The mind loves extremes. It oscillates between pride and guilt, desire and rejection, obsession and indifference. And yet, the truth, the real, silent truth, is always found in the middle. That middle is not mediocrity, it's coherence, the place where opposites dissolve into understanding. The more you live from that middle, the slower the pendulum becomes, until one day you feel it, the still point between thoughts, a brief gap, a silence so complete it feels like eternity. That silence is your center. That is consciousness, not the mind, but the space that holds it. When the ancients spoke of stilling the mind, they didn't mean suppressing thought. They meant finding the rhythm behind it, because even silence has its pulse. Listen, there's a pattern behind your mental chaos. Your overthinking is not random, it's rhythm forgotten. The same energy that feeds anxiety can feed awareness if redirected consciously. You don't have to stop the motion. You only need to balance it. Notice the pendulum when it begins to swing. You wake up, the mind starts racing. You catch it mid-motion and breathe. You watch it move, and as you watch, its arc softens. Because awareness is gravity, it pulls the pendulum back toward the center. You don't need to fight your thoughts. You only need to remember that you are not them. This is the Hermetic discipline of mental rhythm, the art of letting thought move through you without tearing you apart. It's not passivity, it's mastery, because every swing of thought produces vibration, and vibration creates reality. Your world bends according to the frequency of your thinking. If you live in polarity, you create turbulence. If you stabilize your rhythm, your life begins to align. The outer follows the inner. That's not magic, that's mechanics of consciousness. The Kybalion said, rhythm compensates, meaning every excess in thought or emotion demands correction. Think of it as energetic homeostasis, the universe restoring balance through equal opposite force. When you think obsessively about control, life will send you circumstances to make you surrender. When you indulge in despair, life will offer a spark of hope, not as comfort, but as counterweight. The law is impersonal. It does not punish, it neutralizes. The problem is, most people never stay still long enough to notice the correction. They resist one extreme, chase the other, and never touch the middle. But what if, for once, you let the pendulum swing without interference? What if you watched your thoughts rise and fall without grasping or fearing them? You'd begin to feel the symmetry of your own mind. You'd realize that even your confusion follows pattern, and in that realization, chaos dissolves into order. You'd stop asking, How do I stop thinking so much and start asking, what rhythm am I following when I think? This is what the Hermeticists meant by mental alchemy. Transmutation doesn't happen by force, it happens by rhythm. To change thought, you must first slow it. To slow it, you must observe it. To observe it, you must find stillness. And stillness is only found through rhythm, the sacred alternation between focus and rest. You cannot awaken in constant acceleration. Awareness blooms in the pauses. It's in the moment between inhale and exhale, between thought and thought, between feeling and reaction. That's where truth lives. That gap is the threshold of mastery, and you cross it every time you choose to breathe instead of react. You may think this is small, one breath, one pause, one conscious observation, but each time you do it, you reclaim territory from the pendulum. You reduce the amplitude of its swing. You reclaim rhythm as your ally. And little by little, thought becomes servant again, not master. Because here's the secret the Hermetic sages never stopped repeating. You don't have to silence the mind to find peace. You have to synchronize it. When your mind breathes with your body, and your body moves with your awareness, the pendulum becomes music. The swing becomes pulse, and pulse becomes power. That is how thought becomes creation. That is how rhythm becomes mastery. You can feel it now, can't you? The slight softening inside your chest, the clarity that appears when you stop forcing clarity. This is the return to natural rhythm, not imposed, not practiced, simply remembered. When the pendulum of the mind slows, something emerges behind it. Presence, the part of you that has never swung, the axis that has always been still. And from that stillness, you begin to see the world was never unstable, only your attention was. Now you're learning to anchor it. This is the beginning of true dominion, not over others, but over yourself. You cannot command the sea, but you can learn to ride it. You cannot freeze the wave, but you can become the surfer. And the surfer's mastery lies not in strength, but in timing, in rhythm. That's where the law becomes art, and emotion becomes instrument. If you've felt that shift, that inner softening, that glimpse of stillness, write it, declare it. In the comments, seal it with the words, I choose rhythm. Because every initiation needs a gesture, and this is yours. The next step will reveal how to embody this rhythm physically, through the breath, the body, and the moment-to-moment dance of awareness. There comes a moment in every seeker's path when understanding is no longer enough. You can quote the laws, explain the symbols, repeat the truths, and still, your heart trembles when the wave hits. Because intellect cannot surf, only presence can. The principle of rhythm must be lived, not memorized, and the body, not the mind, is its first ocean. Close your eyes again. Feel the movement beneath your skin, the subtle tides that rise and fall with every breath. This is your first initiation into the living rhythm. Every inhale is an ascent, every exhale, a descent, and between them, that quiet, sacred still point, the same center we spoke of before, the axis of the pendulum, the eye of the storm. The breath is not just physiology. It is the language through which the cosmos speaks to you. If you can master your breathing, you can master your emotions, not by repression, but by resonance, because emotion is energy in motion, and breath is the conductor of that energy. When you breathe chaotically, you feed the pendulum. When you breathe rhythmically, you tame it. Each breath becomes a wave, predictable, gentle, harmonized, and the more you synchronize with it, the more your inner tides return to order. In Hermetic philosophy, this practice is called aligning the microcosm with the macrocosm. It means restoring the same rhythm that governs galaxies within your own nervous system. You are not separate from the sea. You are one drop of its infinite movement. To surf the inner ocean, you must stop resisting the wave and start listening to its pattern. The wave is not against you. It's teaching you how to move. Imagine for a moment you are standing on a surfboard in the middle of the vast ocean. The horizon stretches endlessly. A wave begins to rise. You can't control it, but you can feel it. You align your body with its movement, not against it. You stop fighting gravity. You surrender, not as defeat, but as participation. That's what it means to live in rhythm with life. You stop trying to dominate the wave and instead, you merge with its intelligence. That's emotional mastery, not suppressing the wave, not drowning in it, but learning its language, feeling its momentum, breathing with it, riding it until it becomes you. Because the wave was never your enemy, it was your mirror. It rises and falls exactly as you do. Every swell of emotion, every crash of fatigue, every calm after, they are not random moods. They are choreography, the ocean of psyche following the same divine meter that moves the stars. This is the paradox most people never cross. You cannot control emotion, but you can conduct it. You cannot stop the storm, but you can learn to sail. And the sail of the Hermetic practitioner is awareness joined with breath. When emotion surges, you breathe deeper. When it crashes, you breathe softer. You never abandon the wave. You modulate its rhythm, and slowly you realize your breath and your emotion are not separate. They are reflections of each other, two sides of the same tide. Feel your breath again. Inhale slowly through the nose. Let it expand the belly, then the chest. Pause. That still, silent point. Exhale through the mouth. Slow, steady. Repeat. This is not a trick. This is ancient technology. You are teaching your nervous system to remember what creation already knows. Everything moves and movement can be sacred. You are giving form to the formless, rhythm to chaos. Notice what happens when you breathe this way for a few minutes. The storm inside softens. The edges of thought blur. A subtle clarity begins to form, not from effort but from harmony. This is rhythm as healing. You are not fixing yourself. You are tuning yourself, because the body is an instrument and the breath is the key that tunes it. Every breath brings you closer to coherence, the state where body, mind, and soul vibrate as one. Hermetic teacher said, "He who understands rhythm commands balance." To command in this sense means to harmonize, to bring back into unity what was once fragmented. That's what you're doing when you breathe consciously during emotional turbulence. You're no longer at the mercy of the swing. You're dancing with it. Each breath, a step in the cosmic choreography. Each pause, a moment of remembrance, until, slowly, the dancer and the dance become indistinguishable. In this practice, you begin to experience something sacred, the return of your natural tempo. The modern world has pulled you out of sync. Its noise has accelerated your breath, shortened your patience, and broken your rhythm. But with each conscious breath, you reclaim territory from the machine. You slow the tempo back to the human scale. You remember that nature never hurries, yet everything gets done. When you breathe this way, you are not escaping your emotions. You're integrating them. Anger turns to assertive energy. Sadness becomes softness. Fear transforms into attention. Every emotion finds its proper place in the rhythm of the soul. You stop labeling them as good or bad. You start feeling them as movement, intelligence, communication, and you realize nothing inside you was ever wrong. It was simply out of tune. This is the art of surfing the inner ocean, the transformation of chaos into cadence. It's not about never falling. You will still fall. The difference is that now you fall consciously, and every fall teaches you how to rise with more grace. You start to understand what the Hermetic masters meant when they said, "The wise are not untouched by the pendulum, but they neutralize its swing." They don't avoid the wave, they become its rhythm. When you live this way, your entire perception changes. Life stops feeling like a series of highs and lows. It becomes a breathing organism, alive, intelligent, balanced. You no longer fear the descent because you know it's preparation for ascent. You no longer chase the high because you know it will pass naturally. And when you breathe, you no longer just inhale air, you inhale awareness. Every breath becomes remembrance. Every exhale, release. And through that rhythm, you rediscover serenity, not as an escape but as a pulse. You begin to notice it everywhere, in the rhythm of rain, in the cadence of footsteps, in the sound of your own heartbeat. You begin to live in time with existence, and suddenly everything feels like music again. Even your pain, a low note in the greater harmony. Even your silence, a pause between verses. Even your uncertainty, a momentary dissonance leading back to resolution. You're not lost anymore. You're dancing, and the dance is sacred. You are the ocean now, You no longer resist the tides. You breathe, you flow, you move, you rise when it's time to rise, and rest when it's time to rest. You've stopped forcing your rhythm. You've begun remembering it, and that is the beginning of true mastery. If something inside you softened while you breathed, don't let it fade. Write it, seal it. In the comments, I breathe with the rhythm of life. That phrase is not decoration, it's initiation. Because once spoken, it begins to align you with the next law. The portal continues. Next, we'll explore the breath as the bridge, where the rhythm becomes presence itself. Everything you have learned until now was preparation for this moment. Understanding rhythm is one thing. Becoming rhythm, that is initiation. The breath is the bridge between both. It is the invisible thread connecting body and spirit, emotion and awareness, heaven and earth. Through it, you translate the abstract law of rhythm into living experience. Every Hermetic principle has a gateway in the human being. For the law of rhythm, that gateway is the breath, because the breath is the most faithful mirror of your state of consciousness. When the mind is scattered, the breath becomes shallow. When emotion surges, the breath accelerates. When fear rises, the breath halts. And when awareness returns, the breath deepens. Without effort, without control, like the tide returning home. This is not just metaphor. It is physics. Your nervous system obeys rhythm. Each inhale activates, each exhale releases. This is the primordial pulse of life. Expansion and contraction, attraction and release. When you breathe with awareness, you synchronize your microcosm with the macrocosm. You become an instrument through which the universe feels itself. Most people breathe unconsciously, trapped in survival rhythm, fast, anxious, shallow. They breathe only into the chest, never reaching the depth of the belly. They don't know that this is the rhythm of fear. Every creature, when frightened, breathes that way. It's the pattern of defense, of contraction. And when you breathe like that every day, your entire energy field collapses inward. You stop flowing, you start surviving. But when you breathe consciously, slowly, deeply, something shifts. The wave returns to its natural amplitude. The nervous system recalibrates. The heart and brain begin to synchronize. Your inner rhythm aligns with cosmic order. It's as if your entire being remembers something ancient, a forgotten harmony. This is the breath as the bridge, the return to rhythm through awareness. Try it now. Inhale gently through your nose. Feel the air descend into your belly, expanding it softly. Hold for a heartbeat. Exhale slowly through your mouth, as if releasing centuries of weight. Pause and repeat. Notice the subtle wave moving through you. Inhale, crest, exhale, rest. That is the ocean of your existence, condensed into a single moment. Do this long enough, and your mind begins to listen. You start to feel silence between thoughts. The noise inside slows, not by suppression, but by resonance. The pendulum still swings, but you are no longer its hostage. You have found the bridge. You can cross from chaos to clarity at will, just by returning to the breath. This is the most ancient alchemy, turning breath into awareness and awareness into freedom. When Hermetic initiates trained in the temples of Egypt and Alexandria, they practiced in silence for years, mastering the rhythm of breath before they ever touched a book of philosophy, because they knew, without control of breath, there can be no control of mind. Without rhythm in the body, there can be no rhythm in life. The breath is not the symbol of spirit, it is spirit, moving through flesh. The same word in ancient languages, pneuma, prana, ruach, means both breath and soul. Every inhale is a renewal of life. Every exhale is a surrender of it. In between is you, the bridge between worlds. Breathe deeper, and you will notice something miraculous. When the breath slows, time slows with it. Thoughts lose their urgency. Emotions lose their violence. Awareness expands. You are no longer racing through life. Life is flowing through you. And in that flow, balance becomes effortless. Because the rhythm is no longer something to master. It is something you have become. This is how the Hermetic principle becomes embodied. Each breath is a declaration. I am part of the cosmic order. Each pause between breaths is remembrance. I am the stillness within the motion. You are both the wave and the silence beneath it, both the exhale and the vastness that holds it. This is the mystery the ancients encoded in every initiation ritual. Before you can command energy, you must first master rhythm. And before you master rhythm, you must surrender to breath. You might ask, how can something so simple be sacred? Because simplicity is the highest form of power. The universe moves in simple rhythms. Inhale and exhale, day and night, expansion and contraction, life and death. It is only the human mind that complicates what is natural. When you return to the breath, you return to the divine proportion of existence. You align with what Hermeticists called the great oscillation, the pulse of the all. You don't need faith for this. You only need awareness, because the law doesn't ask for belief. It asks for participation. As you breathe consciously, notice how emotion becomes transparent. You no longer drown in it. You see through it, as if emotion were light passing through clear water. The clarity comes not from control, but from rhythm. You are not suppressing the wave. You are conducting it, and in that conduction lies peace. Let this sink in. Your breath is the steering wheel of your inner ocean. When you lose it, you drift into storms. When you reclaim it, you return to the shore. Every exhale is an act of forgiveness. Every inhale, an act of courage. And every pause, an act of faith. The trust that even in stillness, life moves. Do you understand now why ancient mystics called breath the bridge? Because it connects what was once divided, body and spirit, thought and silence, rhythm and awareness. The one who commands breath commands energy, and the one who commands energy commands destiny. Not through force, but through alignment. That is Hermetic mastery. Not domination, but harmony. From this point on, you no longer practice rhythm. You live it. Every breath becomes a prayer. Every pause becomes a meditation. Every exhale becomes a release from illusion. You start to move like the universe, not in haste, but in wisdom. And in that movement, emotion transforms into power, thought into vision, life into art. The law of rhythm ceases to be philosophy. It becomes heartbeat. Breathe again. Feel it. You are not separate from the all. The same force that turns galaxies now moves your lungs. The same intelligence that spins the stars now enters your bloodstream. You are not a being lost in chaos. You are the bridge between chaos and order. The proof is your breath. If you can remember this in the midst of any storm, to breathe consciously, to observe rhythm, to return to center, you will have entered the true temple, because the temple was never outside. It was the breath inside your chest, waiting to be remembered. If the silence between your breaths revealed something, don't run from it. Honor it. In the comments, write, "I breathe the law." That phrase seals the passage, because once you name the rhythm, it begins to move through you consciously. The next step will reveal what lies beyond the breath, the still point that commands all rhythm. Equilibrium. At some point, every seeker realizes that spirituality isn't measured by what happens in meditation. It's measured by what happens when the world pulls you out of it, when the noise returns, when deadlines crush your breathing, when a message ignites your anxiety, when someone speaks, and suddenly the silence you built collapses into reaction. It's easy to breathe in stillness, but can you breathe in chaos? Can you keep rhythm when the song becomes unpredictable? That is the real test, and the true reward, of Hermetic practice. Because rhythm is not just a mystical law, it's a daily discipline, a way of walking, talking, thinking, and existing that brings cosmic order into human form. Equilibrium is not found in escaping the world, but in entering it with consciousness intact. It is the art of remembering the law of rhythm while the pendulum moves around you, and choosing not to move with it blindly. To live in equilibrium is to stand in the center of your own storm and feel peace anyway, not by denial, but by resonance. You don't suppress chaos, you absorb it into your rhythm until it harmonizes. This is what it means to live by the principle, to understand that your day, your relationships, your emotions, your work, they are all waves. And if you listen carefully, each has its own tempo. There's a rhythm to speech, a rhythm to rest, a rhythm to creation and to destruction. When you align with those rhythms, life stops feeling like resistance and starts feeling like choreography. Morning, for example, is not just a time, it's an expansion phase. Your energy rises, your awareness awakens, the outer world begins to take form. Midday is culmination, intensity, heat, activity. Evening is contraction, a return inward, a call to release. Night is dissolution, the death of form, the descent into rest. Every day is a miniature version of life and death, and your ability to move through these natural cycles with grace determines the stability of your inner world. But modern life has forgotten this sacred cadence. We wake without awareness, work without rhythm, and collapse without closure. We force expansion even when the body asks for contraction. We chase activity when the soul begs for silence. We fight nature and then wonder why we feel empty. The Hermetic master lives differently. They rise with the sun, not the screen. They eat when the body is ready, not when the clock commands. They work in focused pulses, not endless exhaustion. They rest intentionally, not guiltily. They move through the day as a ritual, not a race, because they know rhythm is not time, it's alignment. And alignment is what restores the energy that chaos steals. Look at your life now. How many of your struggles come from moving against your own rhythm? You push when you should rest. You speak when you should listen. You demand when you should surrender. That is the true exhaustion, not work, but resistance. When you live outside your natural tempo, every action consumes more energy than it should. When you return to rhythm, energy returns with you. Equilibrium begins with observation. When do you feel most alive? When does your mind naturally quiet? When does emotion rise and fade? Chart it like an inner tide map. You'll start to see patterns, certain hours, certain environments, certain people, all triggering particular rhythms in you. Awareness of those patterns is power, because once you see them, you can choose to align or to resist, to flow or to force. Now imagine applying this law in relationships. You stop expecting people to be constant. You stop demanding that love never change shape. You begin to notice emotional seasons in others just as you do in yourself. When someone withdraws, you no longer panic. You understand it's their tide pulling inward. When someone opens, you meet them with the same rhythm. You learn to dance instead of cling. And this dance creates what modern psychology calls emotional regulation, but Hermeticism simply calls harmony. Rhythm teaches compassion, because it shows you that no one is truly inconsistent. They are simply oscillating within their own law. To judge them for it is to judge the tide for ebbing. To flow with them consciously is to bring peace to both. In work, rhythm becomes mastery. You discover that focus cannot be constant. It too has tides. So you stop forcing productivity and start honoring cycles of intensity and rest. You work deeply, then step away. You allow contraction after expansion. This is not laziness, it's efficiency aligned with universal law. Because when you move in rhythm, the universe amplifies your effort. When you move against it, you exhaust yourself. Even creativity follows rhythm. Inspiration rises, peaks, and fades. If you chase it desperately, it hides. If you rest, it returns. The Hermetic artist doesn't fear the empty phase. They know it's the silence before the next note. They trust the rhythm of creation. They don't chase the wave, they prepare the surfboard. Equilibrium, then, is not balance frozen in time. It's dynamic alignment. It's dancing with life so gracefully that no motion feels like a threat. You remain centered while moving, calm while creating, grounded while expanding. That is true mastery. The storm doesn't stop, but it stops controlling you. The secret is presence. Presence is rhythm made conscious. Every act becomes deliberate. Walking, breathing, speaking, listening. You begin to live with tempo, not in hurry, not in hesitation. You discover that even your heartbeat is your teacher. It doesn't rush. It doesn't resist. It simply pulses, perfectly, endlessly, rhythmically. To live by this principle is to live as nature does, to rise and fall with purpose, to expand and contract with awareness, to rest without guilt, and to move without tension. It's not escape, it's engagement, not neutrality, but harmony. This is equilibrium, the calm that breathes inside motion. From this place, you no longer manage emotions. You direct them. You no longer chase peace. You embody it. The world may still swing violently, but within you, stillness holds, because you've learned to move with the rhythm instead of against it. You've learned that mastery is not resistance, it's resonance. So when the next wave comes, and it will, breathe, feel the rhythm. Don't fight it. Flow with it until the motion becomes melody. And then, simply listen, because the rhythm of your life is not random. It is the echo of the cosmos reminding you, you are part of everything that moves. If you reach this far, it means you didn't just listen, you remembered. Write it below, as a seal of awareness. I move with the rhythm of life, because this is the final step of this spiral. Not an ending, but a pulse that continues. The next portal reveals what lies beyond rhythm, the center that doesn't move. And from there, your true mastery begins. At a certain depth of awareness, a strange realization dawns. You've been watching the pendulum for so long, breathing with its rhythm, learning its patterns, and then suddenly you see, the pendulum was never real. It was always a movement inside you, not an enemy, not even a teacher, just an echo of the mind swinging between opposites, pleasure and pain, hope and despair, attachment and fear. The pendulum is the illusion of duality itself, the great hypnosis that keeps humanity asleep. You've learned how to surf it. Now you must learn how to dissolve it. Because as long as you are moved by opposites, you remain a prisoner of rhythm instead of its master. The final mastery is not control, it's transcendence. The moment when motion stills, not because it was restrained, but because it was understood. This is what Hermetic adepts called neutralization of the pendulum. It doesn't mean indifference, it means freedom, the ability to feel everything without being captured by anything, to act without reaction, to love without dependency, to stand in the middle of the storm and see only symmetry. Look deeply into your own emotional life. Everything you've ever suffered from was born from the swing between opposites. You loved, then you feared. You hoped, then you doubted. You rose, then you fell. And through it all, you mistook movement for meaning. You believed that to feel more was to live more, but the wise know to feel consciously is to live freely. When you observe the pendulum of emotion and no longer identify with either pole, something happens. The swing continues, but you don't move with it. You stand at the axis. You feel the highs and the lows equally, but they no longer define you. They become waves passing through awareness that still point inside you. That's the real self. It doesn't rise or fall, it simply witnesses. The Kabbalion describes it in a single phrase. The master neutralizes the swing of the pendulum by rising to a plane above it. This is not poetry. It's a description of consciousness evolving beyond polarity. When you stop fighting the movement, you gain altitude. You move to a plane where opposites exist, but no longer pull. Pain and pleasure still visit, but they lose gravity. They pass through you like wind through an open window. You begin to live from the still center, not the extremes. Imagine it this way. When you were asleep, the pendulum ruled your life. Every emotion was a command, every thought a leash. Then you awakened and learned to surf. You breathed with the rhythm, moved with awareness, danced with the tide. But now you are invited to ascend to the level of stillness where even rhythm itself dissolves into presence. This is not denial, it's ascension. At this level, life doesn't stop moving. You simply stop calling it good or bad. The labels fall away, and what remains is pure experience. A sadness comes, you feel its depth, but without resistance. A joy rises, you enjoy it, but without clinging. Every emotion becomes part of a single continuum, a living, breathing field of consciousness. That's the state of equilibrium beyond rhythm. It's not emotional numbness, it's emotional clarity. The ocean still has waves, but you have become the depth beneath them. The sages call this mental transmutation, because here, polarity itself becomes your servant. You can shift the swing at will. When the mind begins to sink into despair, you gently redirect it, not by repression, but by vibration. You raise the frequency through breath, awareness, or sound. You don't suppress darkness, you illuminate it. You don't chase joy, you generate it from center. You no longer depend on outer rhythm, you create inner rhythm. It's at this level that emotion turns into energy. Anger becomes movement, fear becomes precision, sadness becomes depth, joy becomes light. Nothing is wasted. Every polarity becomes power when transmuted consciously. This is why Hermeticism is not about escape, it's about sovereignty. You don't run from the world, you simply stop obeying its pendulum. You stop reacting to every fluctuation of the collective. You see how the media, society, even your own memories, are all designed to keep you swinging. From outrage to euphoria, from craving to guilt. But you, the initiate, begin to move differently. Your stillness becomes rebellion. Your calm becomes revolution, because nothing controls a being who no longer reacts. And that is true power, invisible, unshakable, quiet. The world thrives on those who react. The awakened thrive on those moments between reactions. Those moments are portals, the instant between inhale and exhale, between impulse and awareness. That is where your freedom hides. Enter that gap often enough, and you'll notice. You no longer live inside the swing lives inside you. At this level, rhythm becomes choice. You can move fast or slow, expand or contract, act or rest, and all of it happens consciously. You are no longer being moved by the law of rhythm. You are moving with it as its co-creator. This is the hermetic secret of neutralization through participation. You don't break the pendulum by force. You dissolve it through understanding, because what is understood can no longer enslave you. This is freedom, not the dramatic kind that screams victory, but the silent one that breathes peace. The freedom of someone who can walk through both pleasure and pain untouched, not because they are cold, but because they are whole. You've seen both sides of existence and you've stopped choosing. You've chosen the middle, the eternal axis. That's why, when you reach this stage, even the word balance fades, because balance still implies two sides. But the truth beyond rhythm has no sides. It's not balance in its unity. It's not stillness in its wholeness. The opposites were never fighting. They were dancing, and you are the music they were moving to. You can feel it now, can't you? That subtle vibration in the silence, that awareness that doesn't swing anymore. It's still but alive. That's you. The consciousness that commands rhythm instead of being commanded by it. The one who stands in the middle of the pendulum and watches time flow like wind through glass. Unmoved, untouched, unbroken. This is the state of the true Hermetic initiate. A being who no longer reacts, but responds. Who no longer chases peace, but radiates it. Who no longer fights rhythm, but is rhythm. Because they have crossed the final threshold, they have broken the chain. If you felt the pendulum slow, even for a heartbeat, then you've touched the truth. Write it in the comments to seal your initiation. I am the still point. That phrase is not belief. It is declaration. Because once spoken, the law begins to serve you consciously. The next portal reveals what lies at that center. The center that doesn't move, where consciousness itself becomes the rhythm of creation. There is a place inside you where movement ends, where every emotion, every thought, every rhythm dissolves into silence. It is not far away. It is not hidden. It has always been there, waiting for you to stop searching. You've spent your life moving between poles, chasing light, escaping shadow, inhaling and exhaling through the tides of existence. And now, after all the oscillation, all the breathing, all the lessons of rhythm, you arrive. Not at a new technique, but at a stillness that needs none. This is the center that doesn't move. The Hermetic masters called it the axis of the all. Buddhists call it the unborn mind. Mystics call it the heart of God. Psychologists call it pure awareness. Names don't matter. It's what remains when all movement ends. It's not absence. It's not numbness. It's the pure presence behind everything that moves. The witness behind every thought. The silence beneath every sound. The awareness that never began and never ends. If rhythm is the law of motion, this is the law beyond law, the still point around which all rhythm revolves. The pendulum swings, but this center never leaves. Galaxies spin, seasons change, your breath rises and falls, Yet this remains untouched. It has no opposite because it is the source of both. When you begin to live from this center, something extraordinary happens. You still feel emotions, but they pass through you like sunlight through clear water. You still think, but thought becomes a servant of awareness, not its master. You still act, but your actions arise from clarity, not compulsion. You no longer try to stay balanced. Balance simply is. It's the difference between standing in the middle of a storm, trying to fight the wind, and realizing you are the space through which the wind moves. The space is never disturbed. It doesn't resist the storm. It doesn't chase calm. It simply allows everything to exist within it. That space is you. But here's the paradox. You can't reach this center by effort. Effort is movement. The center is found only by surrender, not the surrender of weakness, the surrender of understanding. The moment you stop chasing rhythm, the moment you stop trying to be centered, you discover you already are. The axis doesn't have to be found. It only has to be remembered. When the Hermetic texts say, the all is mind, they don't mean thought. They mean awareness, the still luminous field that gives rise to thought. You are not a fragment of that field. You are that field. Momentarily believing you are a fragment. The rhythm of your life, the emotions, the struggles, the victories, they're ripples on the surface of your own consciousness, but the depth beneath has never moved. That's who you really are. This is the silent revelation at the heart of every initiation. You were never meant to master the law. You were meant to realize you are the law, and beyond it, the same rhythm that governs the tides flows through your lungs. The same intelligence that moves the stars watches through your eyes. The same stillness that holds galaxies in orbit beats behind your ribs. You felt glimpses of this before in moments of awe, of love, of silence. Moments when the world seemed to pause, when time stopped existing. That wasn't imagination. That was you, remembering what you've always been. If you sit now right where you are and simply breathe, you'll notice it. The body moves, but something in you doesn't. The thoughts shift, but something in you remains the same. You can feel emotions rise and fall, yet behind them, stillness. That stillness is the witness. That witness is the real I. You may think, but I'm breathing. That's movement, yes. But the one who sees the breath is not moving. The one who notices rhythm is not bound by it. You are that awareness, the center behind all oscillation. It's the silence in music, the canvas beneath the painting, the screen beneath the movie of your life. Everything happens on it, but nothing ever happens to it. That's the secret the Hermetic sages guarded behind layers of symbols, that the true self is untouchable, beyond vibration, beyond polarity, beyond rhythm itself. You are the axis, not the swing. You are the still point around which universes move. When you live from this realization, your entire perception changes. You stop trying to fix your emotions, and instead you let them express. You stop fearing silence because you realize silence is not emptiness. It's fullness too vast for sound. You stop searching for meaning because you understand that meaning is inherent in being itself. You stop needing to find balance because you can never lose it. You've been the center all along. This is the state of dynamic stillness. Movement continues, but it happens within you, not to you. The world vibrates. Life flows. You remain unshaken, unafraid, unmoved. Because you are the stillness that gives rhythm its existence, you begin to act differently. You speak with calm. You walk without hurry. You create without ego. You love without need. Every gesture becomes balanced, deliberate, rhythmic. Not because you're trying, but because your actions now emerge from stillness itself. You no longer follow the world's rhythm. The world begins to follow yours. This is what the ancients meant when they said, "He who knows the self knows the all." Because the center of the universe and the center of you are the same point. To find one is to find both. And when you live from there, suffering dissolves, not because pain disappears, but because the you who could suffer is gone. Only awareness remains, and awareness is untouchable. Imagine your life lived from this center. Every conflict becomes choreography. Every obstacle, rhythm. Every silence, wisdom. You no longer resist anything because you no longer fear anything. You trust rhythm because you are rhythm. You rest in stillness because you are stillness. You realize that nothing in this universe has ever been against you. It was all the dance of the pendulum, teaching you to find the axis. Now, there's only peace. Not the peace of escape, the peace of truth. The kind that hums quietly in the chest even when the world burns. The kind that cannot be stolen, because it's not given by circumstance, it's born from awareness. That is the heart of Hermetic mastery. Not a life without storms, but a consciousness that remains the same through all of them. The still point in the moving universe. The silence that holds all sound. The axis that never breaks. You are that. You've always been that. You just forgot. Now, you remember. If the silence between these words felt like home, write it now, to seal your remembrance. I am the center that doesn't move, because that declaration isn't a statement, it's a vibration. And once spoken, it anchors you permanently in awareness. From here, the next and final spiral begins, the master of tides, where the awakened consciousness learns not only to dwell in stillness, but to move the rhythm of the world through it. There comes a point in every seeker's journey when stillness stops being refuge and becomes command, when silence no longer means withdrawal, but radiance, when the center within you doesn't just endure the rhythm, it begins to shape it. This is the birth of the master of tides, not someone who has escaped emotion, but one who directs it, not someone who resists the world, but one who moves the world by moving within. It's the stage where awareness becomes creative, where the stillness you discovered in the previous portal turns into force. The master of tides does not react to rhythm. He composes it. He doesn't ask, "What emotion will visit me today?" He asks, "What frequency will I send into the world today?" And the world, obedient to the law, responds in kind, because the law of rhythm was never meant to imprison, it was meant to serve. It's the heartbeat of creation. Every pulse, every breath, every movement of existence, a reminder that rhythm is the instrument of manifestation. When you master it internally, the external begins to dance to your tempo. This is not mysticism. It's mechanics of consciousness. Everything vibrates, everything responds to rhythm. Your emotions are waves, your thoughts are frequencies, your actions are ripples. Together, they create your ocean. When your inner rhythm is coherent, your external reality harmonizes. This is why the Hermetic masters said, "As within, so without." To command rhythm inside is to command rhythm outside. But the master of tides doesn't control. Control belongs to fear. He conducts, like a musician leading an orchestra. Every emotion becomes an instrument, not to be silenced but tuned. Anger becomes percussion, the rhythm of power. Compassion becomes strings, the melody of empathy. Clarity becomes wind, the breath that carries intention. And love. Love is the resonance that holds every note together. When you live from this awareness, your emotional field becomes a living symphony. You no longer suppress the low notes. You use them to deepen the song. You no longer chase the high notes. You allow them to rise and fade with grace. You become the composer of your own vibration. And the universe, ever responsive, arranges itself according to the music you play. This is what the ancient mystics meant when they said the enlightened being commands the elements. They weren't speaking of weather or matter, but of rhythm, because emotion is elemental. Fear, air, anger, fire, sadness, water, security, earth. When these elements are balanced, your inner climate stabilizes, and your outer world mirrors it. The storms of circumstance no longer knock you off course. You ride them, direct them, even use them. The ocean obeys the one who has become its rhythm. But this mastery demands awareness, because the moment you slip into reaction, you descend again into the lower pendulum. The law still works, but now it works through you unconsciously, instead of for you consciously. The rhythm becomes random again, dictated by external forces. This is why vigilance is sacred, not paranoia, presence. To stay awake means to keep your rhythm steady even when the world accelerates. So how does one live as a master of tides? By remembering that emotion is energy, and energy moves through rhythm. When tension rises, don't fight it, conduct it. Slow your breath, widen your awareness. Let the energy flow instead of contracting around it. Direct it with clarity. Ask, what is this emotion asking to become? That simple question transforms reaction into creation. Anger, when met consciously, becomes assertion. Fear, when observed, becomes intuition. Sadness, when honored, becomes compassion. Desire, when purified, becomes purpose. Every wave that once drowned you now carries you forward. This is transmutation in motion, the Hermetic art of using rhythm as a vehicle for transformation. The master of tides also understands timing, because rhythm isn't only about movement, it's about when to move. He doesn't act from impulse, he listens. Every situation has its own tempo, its own pulse, when to speak, when to pause, when to act, when to wait. This listening is sacred, because the universe speaks in rhythm, not in words. The master of tides moves when the current supports him, not when the mind demands. He doesn't rush against the cosmic beat. He trusts that flow itself will signal the right moment. To an untrained eye, it looks like intuition. To the Hermetic initiate, it's alignment. You are no longer a fragment fighting the sea. You are the tide itself, choosing when to rise. And in this rhythm, life begins to unfold differently. Synchronicities multiply. Doors open before you knock. The right words arrive before you speak, because rhythm is resonance, and resonance is attraction. When your frequency stabilizes, the universe organizes around it. This is not manifestation through desire. It's manifestation through coherence. You're not forcing outcomes. You're aligning vibrations. Understand this. The universe doesn't respond to thought. It responds to rhythm. You can think light, but if your rhythm is chaotic, your world reflects chaos. You can think abundance, but if your inner tide is restless, nothing sustains. It's not thought that creates reality. It's the vibration beneath it. The breath, the pulse, the rhythm. That's where creation truly begins. To live as a master of tides is to live as rhythm embodied. You don't need to seek balance. You are balance. You don't need to seek peace. You generate it through resonance. The pendulum no longer pulls you. You've become the pivot. The ocean no longer threatens you. You've become the current. You live not in reaction, but in direction. Your life becomes art, deliberate, harmonious, alive. This is the final gift of the principle of rhythm. It shows you that every oscillation, every emotion, every breath was never punishment. It was initiation. Each swing of the pendulum was carving precision into your soul. Each crash of the tide was teaching you grace. Each rise and fall was sculpting the balance you now embody. You are not who you were when the waves first hit. You are the ocean remembering its own depth. Now, you move with awareness. You speak with rhythm. You breathe with purpose. You act with harmony. Your very presence alters the room, because those who have found their rhythm silently tune the world around them. Others feel it, even if they don't understand why. That is Hermetic influence, not through persuasion, but vibration. The master of tides doesn't need recognition. The rhythm itself is his power. He walks through chaos with calm steps. He enters conflict and brings coherence. He faces storms and becomes the I within them, not by resisting, not by overpowering, but by embodying stillness so complete that all movement bows to it. And that is mastery. To command the rhythm of your inner world until the outer world echoes it. To be the still point in motion, the breath that unites the worlds, the pulse that remembers eternity. You are no longer learning the law, you are living it. If you felt the current of this truth moving through you, if your breath found a deeper rhythm as you read, declare it. Write, I am the master of my tides. Let it be your signature, because this is not the end, it's the point of return. The next portal, the pulse of presence, reveals how to anchor this mastery in daily life, how every breath, every action, every silence can become a deliberate expression of equilibrium.